My wife with only 9 months left to live asked me if she could sleep with her ex just one last time. The words didn't just hang in the air between us in that sterile hospital room, they detonated. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound was the steady, mocking beep of the heart monitor, a machine measuring the very organ her question was tearing from my chest. I looked at Sarah, my Sarah, her face pale but eerily calm against the white pillows. And in that silence, a voice, my voice, but twisted and raw, screamed inside my head, 9 months. 270 some days. And this is how she wants to start the countdown. A cold numbness, thick and insulating, spread from my core to my fingertips. It was the only thing holding back the howl building in my throat. I couldn't look at her. My eyes traced the thin, pale blue line of the 4 tubes snaking from a bag of clear fluid down to the needle taped to the back of her hand. That was real. That was tangible. This was a nightmare. The room itself seemed to press in, the sterile white walls closing like a coffin lid. I could smell the faint, cloying scent of the disinfectant wipes they used on the bedside table, a smell I'd come to associate with a slow, creeping death. It was a smell that clung to my clothes, my skin, a constant reminder of the battle we were losing. "Mark," she said, my name a fragile whisper, a sound that used to be my anchor and now felt like a shove into the abyss. The sound broke the spell. The numbness receded, and the pain rushed in, so acute it was nauseating. My stomach churned, and I had to swallow back the bile. His name, I managed to force out, my voice rough as gravel, unfamiliar to my own ears. "Say his name." She flinched, her body tensing under the thin hospital sheet, and a part of me, a small, ugly part one didn't recognize, felt a spike of satisfaction. I had hurt her back. However minutely, I had made her share a fraction of this pain. "David," she said. The name barely audible, yet it echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. David. The name was a ghost from a life before me. The high school sweetheart. The one she'd lost her virginity to. The one I'd never had to worry about because he was ancient history, a footnote in the long, beautiful novel of our life together. I'd seen a photo of him once, tucked in an old yearbook in her parents' attic, a grinning, tousle-haired boy with his arm around a teenage Sarah, her smile wide and unburdened. Now, he was a specter in our marriage's death chamber, summoned by a single, incomprehensible sentence. Why? The word was ripped from me. It wasn't just a question, it was a plea for a reason that wouldn't shatter me completely. I needed a reason I could understand, a reason that wouldn't paint the last 10 years of our life together as a lie. Sarah's gaze drifted to the window, to the indifferent city lights twinkling in the distance, a world continuing on while ours had just ended. "I just need to feel something else," she began, her voice a thin, reedy thread. "Something that isn't this slow fading. This decay. I need to remember what it was like to be wanted without pity. To be touched not as a patient, but as a woman. To be whole." Each word was a precise, surgical cut. Without pity. The phrase echoed in my mind, taunting me. Did she think my love, my devotion, the countless nights I spent holding her, researching treatments, trying to will my own health into her body, was just pity? I looked at her, truly looked at her. The silk scarf, a vibrant turquoise I'd bought her to match her eyes, now covering the hair she'd lost. The faint, bruise-like shadows under her eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. The new, terrifying fragility in her frame, as if a strong gust of wind could carry her away. This was the woman I'd promised to cherish in sickness and in health. And she was asking me to sanction her betrayal as the ultimate act of that cherishing. The logical part of my brain, the part that was an architect, used to building structures on solid foundations, the part that was already compiling lists of oncologists, treatment schedules, and palliative care options, short-circuited. There was no protocol for this. There was no chapter in the "How to be a good husband to a dying wife" handbook on how to process your wife's request for a final infidelity. I stood up, the chair legs screeching against the linoleum floor, a sound of raw protest. "I can't. I need air." I fled. I walked out of the room, down the bright, overlit hallway, a tunnel of linoleum and despair, past rooms holding their own private tragedies behind half-closed curtains. I pushed through the heavy, swinging doors that led outside, bursting into the cool, unfeeling night. I gulped in the air, tainted with car exhaust and the distant smell of greasy food from a food truck, but it was real. It wasn't the antiseptic-laced death smell of the hospital, the smell that had become the backdrop of my life. Leaning against the rough, cold brick wall of the hospital, I slid down to the concrete, not caring about the dirt or the dampness. The image of her with David flashed behind my eyes, a grotesque, unwelcome phantom. His hands I'd never seen, on the skin I thought was mine alone to worship. His mouth on hers. The scream I'd been holding back finally broke loose, a raw, animal sound that was swallowed by the city's indifferent noise. I was unmoored, adrift in a sea of rage, grief, and a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical burn on my soul. How had it come to this? We were supposed to be fighting this together. I was her fortress, her defender. Now, I felt like the jailer from whom she needed a last, desperate furlough. And the worst part, the thought that coiled in my gut like a venomous snake, was the one I couldn't voice, the thought that threatened to poison every good memory. Was this who she always was? Had the real Sarah been hidden from me all these years, waiting for a get-out-of-jail-free card to be this brutally, unimaginably cruel? I didn't have the answer. All I had was the echo of her question and the terrifying, yawning chasm of the 9 months that stretched ahead, a sentence I now had to serve not just as a caretaker, but as a cuckold. The next 3 days were a cold war fought in the quiet spaces of our home, which now felt less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. We were two ghosts orbiting a black hole of unsaid things. We spoke only in the barest of necessities, our conversations stripped of all warmth. The nurse comes at 10. You should try to eat some of this toast. Dr. Evans called in the new prescription. The silence between these mundane exchanges was a living entity, feeding on our shared pain. I slept on the couch, the stiff cushions a physical manifestation of the new barrier between us. Every time I looked at her, I saw the question in her eyes, a silent, pleading pressure. And every time, I looked away, my own heart a fortress of hurt. I couldn't live inside the question mark. My mind, trained to solve problems and create structures from chaos, needed data. I needed to understand. And that meant confronting the ghost. It meant facing David. Finding him was disturbingly easy. A few searches on social media, and there he was, David Miller, a sales manager for a tech firm, living in a mid-range apartment complex across town. The normalcy of his life, evident in photos of office parties and weekend barbecues, felt like a personal insult. It took me another full day to find the courage, and then another hour sitting in the dim glow of a street lamp outside his building, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the engine off and the interior of the car growing cold. What was I even going to say? Why did my dying wife ask for you? The humiliation was a hot flush on my skin. Finally, propelled by a surge of desperate anger, I got out and marched to his door. I knocked, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet hallway. The man who opened the door was both familiar from that single, years-old photo and entirely foreign. Older, the boyish grin replaced by the slight lines of a man in his late 30s, softer around the middle, but with the same confident, almost arrogant set to his jaw. He was holding a TV remote. "Can I help you?" he asked, his brow furrowed in annoyance that quickly shifted to confusion as he took in my disheveled, desperate appearance. "You're David," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion I actually felt. "Yeah." "Oh, shit." His eyes widened, not with guilt, but with a strange, panicked recognition. "You're Mark. Sarah's husband." He said her name with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, the word cracking like ice. "Nothing is okay. She's dying. And she asked me for one last thing. A final request. You." The color drained from his face. He looked genuinely ill, taking a half-step back into his apartment. "What? No. That's not possible. You must have misunderstood. Are you calling my wife a liar on her deathbed?" I took a step forward, the rage I'd been suppressing for days boiling to the surface, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "No. God, no, it's not that. It's just." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking completely, revealing a man who was startled and deeply uncomfortable. "Look, you better come in. This isn't a conversation for the hallway. His apartment was tidy, impersonal, like a hotel suite. A large TV was paused on a football game. He didn't offer me a seat. We stood in the middle of his living room, two boxers in a ring we never asked to be in. "Mark, you have to believe me," he started, his voice low and earnest. "The last thing I want, the last thing I'd ever want, is to be in the same room with Sarah like that. What we had, it wasn't some great, timeless romance you need to be jealous of." "Then what was it?" I demanded, my heart hammering a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. "It was a mistake," he nearly shouted, then lowered his voice, a deep shame washing over his features. He looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. I was a messed up kid. Arrogant. Entitled. Our relationship, it wasn't healthy. It was toxic. I was possessive. Pathologically jealous. I isolated her from her friends. I'd pick fights if she even looked at another guy. I said things, terrible things to break her down. I did things I'm not proud of, things I've spent years in therapy trying to forgive myself for. He finally chanced to look at me, his eyes pleading for understanding. I emotionally manipulated her for years. I made her feel small. Worthless. I made her believe she was nothing without me. It took her years, Mark, years after we broke up for her to even start feeling like a whole person again. Meeting you. I heard from a mutual friend that you were a good guy, that you made her happy. I was actually relieved. The world tilted on its axis. The foundation I was standing on, built on the bedrock of my rage and betrayal, was crumbling into dust. This wasn't the narrative I had in my head. This wasn't a story of a rekindled flame. This was a story of an old, festering wound. Then why? I whispered, my anger deflating, replaced by a chilling, dawning horror that was somehow worse. Why would she ask for you? Why would she want to see you, of all people, now? David finally looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a pained, almost paternal understanding. Don't you get it, man? It's not about me. It's not about desire. It's not about sex. It's about the ghost. I'm the ghost of the girl she was before she became the strong, incredible woman you married. The girl who felt broken, who believed she was unlovable. He let out a shaky breath, as if unburdening himself of a weight he'd carried for 2 decades. She's facing the biggest, most final monster of her life. And she's trying to slay all the old ones first. She doesn't want to sleep with me. She wants to face me. To stand in front of me, whole and loved and courageous, and prove to herself that the scared, broken girl I knew is gone forever. That she's strong. That she can walk into a room with her oldest demon and not be afraid. She wants to reclaim the power I stole from her 20 years ago. She wants to die whole, Mark. Not just free of cancer, but free of me. The truth didn't just dawn, it exploded, a supernova in the dark confines of my mind, obliterating every assumption, every moment of rage, every feeling of betrayal. The other man wasn't a lover, he was an exorcist. Her request wasn't about infidelity, it was about final, absolute healing. It was a desperate, last-ditch battle for her very soul. She wasn't trying to escape me, she was trying to become completely, utterly whole for me, for herself, for whatever precious time we had left. The karma was not one of punishment, but of profound, soul-clearing truth. I must have muttered some kind of thanks, some semblance of a goodbye. I stumbled out of his apartment, the world looking entirely different. The colors seemed sharper, the sounds clearer, as if I'd been living in a fog and had finally stepped into the harsh, clear light of day. I drove home in a trance, the pieces of my shattered reality reassembling into a completely different, heartbreakingly beautiful picture. I walked into our bedroom. The lamp on her side was on, casting a soft, golden glow. Sarah was propped up in bed, a book open but unread in her lap. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and a desperate, hopeful anticipation. She saw the change in my face immediately. The anger was gone, replaced by something else, a deep, grieving understanding. I saw David today, I said softly, my voice no longer rough, but gentle. She flinched, her body bracing for my anger, my condemnation, the final blow she expected. I walked to the bed and sat beside her, the mattress dipping with my weight. I reached out and took her frail, cool hand in both of mine, warming it. He told me everything. A single, perfect tear traced a path down her pale cheek. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I couldn't find the words. It sounded so ugly, so insane. I just needed." "I know what you need," I interrupted, my voice thick with an emotion so vast it had no name, a terrible, aching blend of love, grief, and awe for her incredible courage. "You don't need my permission to sleep with him, Sarah. You need my permission to face him. You need my blessing to go and slay your dragon. And you have it. I will drive you there myself. I will wait outside. I will be your knight in the parking lot. And when you walk out of that room, when you've conquered that final ghost, I will be there to bring you home. To me. Always to me." The dam broke. She crumpled forward into my arms, sobbing, deep, racking, body-shaking sobs of relief, of a lifetime's burden finally being shared, of being truly seen and understood. I held her, my own tears falling freely into her hair, holding the entirety of her fragile, fierce, magnificent self against me. The monster wasn't David. The monster was the memory he represented, the shadow he had cast over her soul for 2 decades. And we were going to face it, together. Her final request was not an ending. It was a battle cry for the integrity of her own spirit. And I, finally understanding, would be her shield-bearer. The countdown of 9 months was no longer a march toward an end, but a precious, finite space in which to achieve a final, impossible victory. Subscribe Karma Twin Voices for more.